Good afternoon. Welcome. How we doing? In true custom Shagsworth fashion, I refuse to give everyone, at least the viewers, the last 25 seconds of the intro. Good afternoon. Hello. Don't do many YouTube lives, but some time ago I decided to put together some form of solo podcast where I talk about things that I think will be fleeting and disappear from the news cycle pretty fast. So I titled it "Here Today, Gone Tomorrow," and I hope you guys enjoy. We're just gonna do a quick little rundown of some things that I've stumbled across on Twitter over the past couple of days, and just to identify some of the things I find wrong going on with it. It's just one of those things that this podcast is meant to highlight some of the things that I find disturbing and even just kind of off-putting about the world right now. Over the past couple of months, and close to a year now, I spent a lot of time discussing how I've occupied the politically homeless center of the political spectrum because I used to identify as a progressive not so long ago because I thought, well, and the truth is, for those who are not as aware of like my political leanings, if you follow me on Twitter, you know that I'm taking a very firm stance on a lot of things recently because I spent a long time pretending I understood the world at large and understanding what could be going on with social issues and all that. And I played the hard role of or I guess the easy role of the victim nowadays. And when I was living in Hawaii for about 10 years, when I first moved there, I was not so much in the SJW phase. So about 10 years ago, I grew up not conservative, but definitely open-minded. And then as I moved to a place like Hawaii, which has a bit of a disturbing history as far as its occupation and, going from kingdom being occupied by the U.S., then taken over sort of forcefully from the Queen, and not so long ago, less than 100 years ago, really. I think around 80 years ago. So there's a lot of hurt feelings there still. Some of which people are still alive and remember these things. So I started taking into account this started taking that into account and applying it to myself and how like I was sort of this uh, perpetuating this oppressor role by living in a place like Hawaii. And while I made a lot of good local friends, this stuff never really truly sat with me. Like it was like it things like that were like oil and water didn't quite mix the way I wanted it to. It felt like nothing. It didn't make sense, but I still played the role because I thought that's what I was supposed to do as someone who was more light skinned, who didn't grow up there, who was took a plane and started putting my roots down. So I kind of accepted it, and over time, it just kind of got worse and worse and worse as the real political movements started happening, uh, and especially like when George Floyd happened, it totally boiled over, and it was like, see, this is the problem. See, you look like this. See, ACAB, all that stuff. And while while I do agree that there are times when people can be pretty bad and awful, I, there's a lot of painting people with really really broad brushes, and I didn't like it. Many people found that it was just one of those things where a certain group didn't want to be labeled a certain way, and then everyone was labeling a group a certain way. And people even came up and told me while I was living in Hawaii, like, racism against white people is just something that you do. It's okay. It's culturally okay because of whatever the past may have been. And it was a really really hard pill to swallow for a long time. And 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 because being a white person living in Hawaii, which is mostly uh Hawaiian, Polynesian, you know Southeast Asian uh population, you kind of just fell into that because if you didn't, your ass got whooped. So it was a very aggressive society, but you learn to just kind of live with it. And I really do love the Hawaiian people. They're amazing people. They're loving, caring people, multiple generations living underneath one another. It's a really, really beautiful place. So, as a quick introduction to who I am as a person, if you have not caught the previous ones, this will be a more regular segment now. Uh, but that is a little bit sort of about me. I see people are chatting in the chat. Hello, everyone. Demented and Cap Radio. How you doing? How you doing? Making fun of the man bun. How dare you? How dare you? You're just mad because you don't have that beautiful hair that I. That's part of the topics we'll talk about. No, I mean it's really so this was meant to be designed. Hopefully, we'll take on things here and there, mainly focusing stuff I see across Twitter because I mean there's a lot of stuff you find on there. There's even some stuff that I've found, and now I'm feeling unprepared because I don't know if I have it saved. But there's many, 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 many different things out there that they're branded with a certain headline, and when you dig into the actual articles and read them, they tell a completely different story than what is actually. The headline is meant to make you mad. It's meant to for you to share it, and then off you go. And that to me is a huge problem and the reason for political polarization right now. There's I have seen and I continue to see more liberty-minded people um, popping up here and there, which is great to see. And I can't help but think that that is becoming more and more prevalent. Less people are less people are taking the side of well, I'm seeing a dwindling number of people taking the side of social justice and thinking about their actual liberties. And by that I mean people are actually thinking, I actually want the choice to do something. I don't want to be mandated by a government to make a decision for me. And I think that's a pretty fair thing that people are pursuing now. And you're seeing it in younger generations. A lot of great YouTube channels popping up that are discussing this sort of thing. It's so, so important that we keep our liberties and not in a crazy, insane way that I think a lot of people like picture this group as, but just as a normal, everyday people. When it comes to, you know, the virus of unknown origin, take care of yourself, take care of your family. Everyone understands what their local community is all about. They know who, and again, I believe I've talked about this before, but when people assume, or it's assumed, that COVID-19 highlighted some flaw in our personal health, and because of that, we've been required to lock down. We've been told we can't go certain places. We've been told that children have to wear masks all the time. You know, it's as if people assumed that we didn't know how to take care of our own personal hygiene. We didn't know how to wash our hands before. We didn't know how to stay home from work when we were sick. It assumed that everyone who was at work was constantly sick. There was no such thing as a healthy individual anymore. This is a huge, huge issue. This is a huge issue that, again, like when you start looking at things, when you start asking questions of the mainstream media and or just of, I think, the radical progressive left. I hate using the word radical, but we'll say progressive left. They they first of all, they don't want your question. But when you start asking questions of them and looking into the answers for yourself, you notice a lot of inconsistency. And all the while, like a lot of these headlines, and I've broken a couple down in the past of certain issues that are happening. Like the platform that I'm generally on Twitch, they had a data leak recently, and one of the websites insisted that it had to do, because of that leak. We found that there was a racial and gender gap that needed to be filled on their platform. Again, you're making issues where they're not, and this is what and humans will be tribal by their nature. People will always find a box to put themselves in, and align themselves with, along the way. Even if it's people with red hats or green hats or whatever, they will find a way to band together to feel as if they're a cohesive unit. And that's fine. That's fine. But the way it's being done now is way, way too unhealthy, and it's dangerous. It's dangerous. It's causing huge rifts. The question, though, is whether or not, and this is starting to be recently being asked by people on the left, being asked by Democrats, is national divorce an option that should be on the table? Is national divorce a topic that should be on the table? I think absolutely. I think, and even before my SJW phase, let's say about 8 years ago, I had talked with friends, and even during this phase too, during this phase, I talked about how the United States is such a different place, like in like the four corners that you go, like Pacific Northwest or even the West Coast, you go to the East Coast, especially New England, the Southern states, Midwest. These are all incredibly culturally different places. Why is it a bad thing that we think about dividing up into like 4 or 5 separate areas? And does it have to devolve into civil war? There was a tweet recently that suggested that right wing people are suggesting that we talk about national divorce and that we're trying to force a civil war. I don't know that it escalates things out in a bad way. I think it depends on how it is pursued. I don't know the answer to it, but I think the discussion should happen. I think the discussion should happen. But the discussion is hard to have. It's hard to have. Hard. Wow, I can't talk today. Very, very hard for people to discuss these things individually and without becoming emotional. It's and But again, every single thing, every single news story seems to be split up and talked about in a very and it's playing identity politics with every single headline, making it's almost as if we're getting to a point where everyone needs to be special, so in the end no one will be special. I don't know how healthy that is. Now the there is a lot that there's a lot here in the discussion of national divorce that we need to think about. There's a lot, and I see you in the chat talking about it, and I don't have the solution. Is it should it be off the table? I don't think so. I don't know. I don't believe that people want that. I don't believe it devolves into something as bad as. I will add on to the end of my identity politics thing is that what frustrates me about these things when it comes to identity politics is not that um I don't want whatever identity we're discussing to have a place in the broader culture. Far from it. Anyone who knows me knows that it's not true. What I want from people is I want people in the places based on merit. And I think that's a very, very I think it's an important thing to have. I don't see the downside to it. People say it doesn't work. We've tried it. I don't believe it for a second. If you're qualified to be in a position, you should be in that position. Now, percentages of these groups, when you talk about demographic, if someone is being turned down because of, color of their skin, identity, whatever, that is wrong. If they are qualified for the job, they should be equally as allowed to compete for that job and be a part of that profession, task, etc. And you're right. We're way too complex to just start throwing into boxes. And the one beautiful thing that I listened to Jordan Peterson say many years ago, as I was learning who he was, and when I was told that he was a right wing extremist neo Nazi, I started looking what he was saying, and one of the first things I heard him say was that the logical end to this identity politics game is that everyone has their own individual identity, everyone has their own individual sexuality, race, etc. That is the logical end to all this. When I heard that, I was just, and the way he explained it, obviously he was much more eloquent in his description than myself, but I just thought, wow. And then of course I went down the Jordan Peterson rabbit hole, which was amazingly insightful. And while I don't agree with everything he says, a lot of it is beautifully done. And I just started reading his yes, this is a very good rabbit hole. I just started reading his book, 12 Rules for Life. Prior to that, anyone who's looking for a good book to read, and a good little plug for the man, the myth, the legend, Dr. Gad Saad, his Parasitic Mind book is an amazing trip. That it's his antidote for these woke politics. It's something very everyone should take a look into. We one of the really awesome things that I saw pop up on the Twitter machine was uh, Barry Weiss's her little segment on CNN with Brian Stelter. I thought this was fantastic because not only does Brian look like the little Joker meme that he is, but she totally, like, it's surprising they did not cut her off at any point during. It is a really, really great segment. There's a couple parts where he even asked her, like, well, what are you talking about? Why are you not allowed to say anything? You're not allowed to say anything. And this is the game they play, right? They don't really talk about what she is saying. They question another part. They make her answer another question, which leads into another chain of questioning. Why aren't you? No, it's not that we're not allowed to say it. It's that when you do start talking about these things, then you then you can then you're demonized by one side or the other. That is the real issue, is that it's not that we're not necessarily being silenced, but in the aftermath of saying a particular thing, a lot of us have experienced this, is that you're demonized for that opinion. Oh, you said that thing? Well, that's some neo-Nazi rhetoric. That's some alt-right rhetoric, and you shouldn't be allowed to say that. And it's truly unfortunate, because this is where communication breaks down. This is why the gap between the left and the right has been filled with a bunch of people who just, they're like, I need to be left alone for a little while. I need to just be able to think and question without fear of repercussion in the end. It's I hope that if there's one hope that I have for the next, I don't know, 10 years or so, is that people find a way to just communicate with one another. I've really tried, and I have some plans upcoming as far as Twitch goes. If you follow me on Twitch, and hopefully you do, twitch.tv/Shagsworth, we are going to be doing the it's a podcast. It's going to be a test run with someone else who's very, very progressive. I am not progressive anymore, I guess. Well, I'm progressive in my own way. But the plan is to sit down with this other streamer on their channel, essentially walking into the lion's den and trying to talk about things, especially Twitch centric, because there's a lot of stuff that the platform, to some extent, is just sort of a dumpster fire. So my plan is to try and accelerate that discourse, to talk with people about what's going on, about why their ideas should be challenged, why we should push back. Because it's to help me, right? When you have discussions with someone, it doesn't have to be a heated political debate, but when you talk with people about what's going on in the world, you should be able to push on someone's ideals. They should be able to push back a little bit. That is the idea. But and that's my plan. Sorry, quick little brain fart. My plan is to try and challenge where I can. To not just let people get away with, okay, I said something. No, that's not enough. It's not enough to just say something. You need to be able to put something behind it. You need to be able to you need to be able to explain yourself, because this doesn't just help the person who's asking the question. It helps the person who the question is being asked of. I need you to explain more because I don't fully understand. Good. So we come back around, right? So I'm hoping that this is a way for I'm hoping this is a way for many of us to start to see some results in the communication form, to maybe even open up people's idea on certain topics. And a lot of it, and I'll, this, and it'll be ironic because we're on YouTube right now, which is one of the biggest social networking platforms there is, or biggest platforms in the world. But what we've seen, I think, is largely based on the fact that we have not been able to, like, unplug from our communication, like have a phone call instead of texting, uh, going out and meeting people at the local coffee shop rather than sitting in a Discord chat room. I love my Discord community and I love my streaming community, but it's really important that we get out and see other people face to face. It is a very important thing to learn how to talk with one another face to face. This is a great platform. This is a great platform, and it's a great way for people to connect and to learn. I'm starting to see the benefits of it, and it's amazing. Getting out and seeing people, watching how people move, how they stir in their chair, how their eyes dart around, how they look at you. These are all really important skills that you're going to need at one point or another. I'll give you a personal anecdote that my students that I work with on a daily basis, I help them prepare for the real world. I help them transition out of an educational setting in a trade school to an actual real world job in a dealership. These kids don't know how to talk about themselves. They don't understand themselves enough to communicate their skills to another person. The first time, I mean, everyone has interviewed for the very first time, but it's so obvious that, they'll talk about, all their time on TikTok and their TikTok videos and their video gaming and all the people they know on the video games, but they can't even hold a conversation with a perfect stranger for 30 to 90 seconds. This is alarming. This is alarming, to say the least, because at the very, very least, you need to know how to communicate with another human. It is going to be required of us all. And it's not totally the fault of the younger generation. I don't want to sit here and wave my finger and say, back in my day, I used to walk uphill both ways in the snow with holes in my shoes and shorts on from the local thrift store. That's not at all what I'm saying. I would almost be willing to excuse most of the younger generation in what's happened, because social media and technology has advanced in a way that it's starting to streamline all of our usual tasks. And because of that, it has removed the need, for face-to-face interaction. We don't have a landline anymore with an answering machine attached to it. There's no reason to be in your home at any given time. That used to be like almost a prerequisite. At some point, you were home because you need to be, you need to get in touch with your family. You sat down and had dinner with your family. All that stuff is just, you don't need to anymore. There's drive-in everything or drive-through everything. There's DoorDash. There's every single thing that used to be somewhat of a time sink is now quick, accessible, and cheap. So I don't blame the younger generation necessarily, but we're still in a really, really bad place for a lot of these kids. They don't understand that they still need to know how to interact with another person, because you need to go to a bank to open a bank account. In order to do that, you need to be able to talk to a perfect stranger. You need to know the questions to ask. And even if you don't know the necessary questions, you need to know to ask for help. Google has made everything, all the information accessible right now. I find it alarming that kids don't know how to ask questions when they're stumped. They sit there frozen, silent, and expect things to come to them, because likely that's what happened. They didn't know something and their parents ran to their side and helped them immediately. They helped them immediately, and they didn't allow them to work through the problem in the process. It is so, so incredibly important that we do that for our kids. There's a someone just sent me a really funny tweet, and we'll bring this up because I did see this yesterday, and I want to make sure that we do touch on it. I do want to make sure we touch on it. This is the kind of news that we need to that we need to really illustrate is actually a thing on the internet, and it's alarming to think that this even needs to be discussed. Right-handed privilege. Right-handed privilege. That's right. You heard it. You heard it here. It's easier, makes life easier. There's a sense of belonging to fit in. The world is organized by right-handers. There's more access, more opportunity, and more advantage. I don't think I've ever seen a bigger piece of hogwash. And for no reason at all. Like, we have these things, right? We have things like this, and people are dead ass serious. This isn't something set up by the Onion or the Babylon Bee. And perhaps you're right. Perhaps we do need to go back to shaming, because this is the sort of thing that would get you laughed out of. And this looks like they're in a university somewhere. Oh, UNC students and Greek organizations have to listen to this garbage. I can't help but think that these people are taken seriously on at any level. Why? So the majority of people are right-handed. Big whoop. I would love to know the percentages. Because even if that's true, even if it's, I mean, it is true, but what's the actual percentage of right-handed? Let's look it up. The idea of equity in this particular thing. So, in what percentage of the human population is left-handed? We'll go at it from a different angle. 10% of the population is thought to be left-handed. It means there could be upwards of 700 million total lefties around the globe. So the idea of equity here is very important. We need to make sure, and this account pretends, or this person pretends, that there's zero access to anything left-handed, right? From a business standpoint, it just doesn't make any sense to make as many right-handed products as left-handed products. I don't get it. I don't even understand the argument here. I'm actually quite confused. I'm baffled that this is even a thing. But it's at this point, there's not much that surprises me with the stories or things that are considered news or newsworthy on the left. It's very, very, very unsurprising that that this is that this is actually a thing that people actually showed up for. There's at least 4 people in the audience here. Hopefully, that's all. In the foreground of this photo, there's 4 people sitting there, 5, including the person who is actually talking about this. Does one have to? Does one have to like pump themselves up to get the balls to walk on stage to do a talk like this? Is it really is this a thing that people this person went home, studied, and went through their notes so they didn't have to keep looking down at their presentation? This is what we're looking for? This is what we're studying for? I would comment on the hair, but that's just low-hanging fruit at this point. It's it's worrisome to say the least. It's worrisome to say the least. And let's not forget about this clown, you know, let's not forget about this clown who at the end of the day wants you to ask for permission in order to see your family on the holidays. This guy still somehow is relevant in the news cycle, and I'm starting to think that no one is really actually paying attention to him. I'm thinking his usefulness is starting to run out as far as this goes. If you're vaccinated and your family members are vaccinated, then you can enjoy the holidays. Go kick rocks, sir. I think not. Now, I have nothing necessarily incredibly poor to say about this man, other than I think a he's a glorified windbag at this point. I think at one point he was very helpful and very insightful, but now he just seems to be reading off of cue cards that someone else wrote for him. And the fact that people are actually looking to this man in order to make plans for the holidays is insane. Even progressive people I know, like, aren't even taking this seriously. And those who are so far gone at this point, I can't help but think that there's no bringing them back. You shouldn't be looking to this guy for answers about your holiday plan. It's it's beyond me why people do this to themselves. And you wonder why people are depressed. These poor kids that have been kept home for so long in school and forced to wear masks and forced to be antisocial in the name of a virus that, you know, seriously affects to the tune of 99.5% of people over 85 years old. This is the scary, inescapable death sentence that everyone is going nuts over on a daily basis. It's, you know, I'm not saying it's not serious. I understand it's serious, and I know people who have been severely affected by it. But to say that, but you know, when you look at how people talk about this thing and how this guy talks about it, you would think that contracting it was meant that you were in the hospital 100%, and you were probably be on a ventilator, if not ready to die. That is how this is brought. At least that's how I get it from people. When people talk about it, that's how it sounds to me. That's how it registers in my ears. But the reality is not as bad. It's not nearly as bad. But if you talk about something like that, you become the extremist. You become the one who's being radicalized, who's being indoctrinated. No. We need to be medical authoritarians. We need to let the government, through the strong arm of these techno giants, in order to tell us what is true, to tell us what we can hear, what we can say, and that's it. The irony is I'm using that particular platform in order to send my message to you guys. Sorry to say. We're in a very, very weird time, and if you're not keen to it, it could be a dark place. It can be an extremely, extremely dark place. I hope my hope is that people my hope is that people, you know, are not I hope people realize what's happening and what is going on. I hope they see I hope they see that when stuff like this, when Fauci comes out and says, if you're vaccinated, you can go, you can enjoy the holidays. I hope when people see stuff like that, they understand the BS that's being, you know, run through the mill on a daily basis. Pardon me. Now, one of the interesting things that I did read, you know, we talked about there is talk rather about the Chicago police, the Fraternal Order of Police. They're attempting to induce an insurrection, according to Chicago Mary Lori Lightfoot, aka Beetlejuice. It's now the headline's a bit misleading. I believe now she does say that it seems that they're trying to induce an insurrection, which I think is total. I think what they're trying to do is stand up for what they believe in. Now, the problem is, and I believe this also relates to another headline where they're being denied retirement because of not getting vaccinated and being fired. It is within their contract that they're not allowed to protest according to their collective bargaining agreement. This is, I think, is where we're seeing all this stuff happen. Now, another reason why unions are just trash, in my opinion. But she's not wrong in that aspect of it. I don't like her as a mayor. I think she's really bad for Chicago. I don't think she's done many good things for Chicago. But she's not wrong in that aspect. Now, if there's something in a collective bargaining agreement, well, they'll use that. There's a reason that you lay these things out. Now, not being able to protest seems like a pretty stupid thing to have in your collective bargaining agreement, but I would see why they would do it. But the fact that they're claiming that they're trying to induce an insurrection, again, these are words, right? These are words. And remember, meaning of words nowadays are subjective. They are subjective. They don't mean anything. There's actually no real meaning attached to anything, according to the progressive left. So they change the meaning of definitions at will. When they're tired of a certain definition, they change it. Insurrection is one of those words that we're seeing just being like used willy-nilly. We saw what happened on January 6th. It's not something that I support. By the traditional definition of insurrection, it certainly was not. There was definitely people doing wrong things on January 6th. But there's a lot of footage that I've seen of just people strolling around, peacefully going about their way, cops letting people through doors, guiding people in, moving stuff out of the way so people could get in. So, you know, again, and it was unfortunate that one, you know, girl lost her life. It's awful. You know, any loss of life is terrible. But this is what they do. They changed meanings of words in order to use them as they need. Induce an insurrection. This looks so bad. It's going to make headlines. It's going to sound really, really bad. Lots of people dying. It's truly, and you've seen these words change meaning over the past year or two since Trump started running for re-election, and you know, through the election and into the 2020 in 2021 presidency with Biden. All these things are happening in real time, and it is truly it's truly sickening. Because the thing is that the big mainstream media machine is doing this thing where Merriam-Webster changes a dictionary definition. Mainstream media pumps that definition out to everyone. So then when people question it, be like, that's not what insurrection means. That's not what this means. And they said, no, that is what it means. And it doesn't matter that you bring up the fact that there is a change log of definitions on these pages. It doesn't matter, because now you're the crazy one, because you probably doctored that. So it's a really strange thing that we're finding. And I'm alarmed to say the least. Good to see the beer is going strong with you. Appreciate it, Mr. Brana. Good to see you, my friend. I meant to call you the other day. How you doing, sir? It really is an unfortunate turn of events that we're seeing happen in history. This is a very, very interesting time in history. A very interesting time. And don't and this is the thing that's gonna happen, right? This is the thing that's gonna happen is that it's gonna continue to happen because people are unfortunately, and I hate using this word too, complicit in all of it. The mainstream media machine is doing its thing the way it should. And for those of you, if you haven't seen the uh the Joe Rogan experience with Dr. Sanjay Gupta, it is a really, really great episode. I think I have like a half an hour left on it, but it really is an amazing watch. And what was really nice to see about that particular episode was that you could tell that Dr. Gupta was there in good faith. He wanted to have a good discussion with Joe Rogan, but you could tell he was also doing the bidding of his employer. You could tell that he was towing the line because he needs to, right? He's still employed with them. Um, he needs to toe the line the best he can while still acting as an individual. This is really important too. Like I said, I think someone like him walking into the lion's den, as it were, is very difficult. And he did a great job. It was a great discussion. And when he was drilled by Rogan on the whole ivermectin thing, I think it really showed. I think that was really him like towing that line for sure. But he answered the questions the best he could. Blah blah blah. Then this happens. Literally, I think the following couple days afterwards, he goes on, and of course, Donnie Fresh here decides to bring it up. He says, it's not a lie to say that ivermectin is used as a horse dewormer. I think that's important, and it's not approved for COVID. And he didn't he did not. And the issue here is that Sanjay Gupta needs to speak up at this point. He needs to say, well, listen, Don, Joe was not wrong in what he said either. He took the human form of the drug. But he's very careful with his words here too. Sanjay Gupta says, correct, if you look at the data, there's no evidence that it really works against COVID. It's not his job to now open up the discussion about the whole entire continent of Africa, the way they started talking about it on JRE. They don't have time for that discussion. But what he should have done was corrected Don, said, Don, you're not wrong. This has been used as a horse dewormer in the past, but it did win the Nobel Prize for its application in humans, been applied about 1 billion times. But you're right. It has not been approved for COVID. That would have been fine. But yes, instead, he decided to take this route. And now it becomes a bad faith engagement because he can't acknowledge the fact that Joe Rogan was not wrong in his application of it. He was given ivermectin by his doctor. But yeah, it is his job to stop Don and be like, no, hold on, Don, and explain how it really should be. This is the issue with the mainstream media narrative. And again, I don't like, as an individual, when I go and talk to someone, I hate using the term mainstream media. But this is where people are getting their news. This is where people are getting their news. Him and Joe have a private conversation, well, public, but him and Joe have a one-on-one discussion about his using ivermectin, and CNN slandering him. They kind of come to an agreement. He can't carry that over to this discussion. People are now seeing this. All the wrong people are seeing this as the actual truth of the matter, and they're not hearing the side of their nuanced discussion, because that's what people need. We need the nuanced discussion behind this, not this, whatever that was called. And And it's really sad to see, because I was really impressed for the most part for seeing that conversation that Sanjay Gupta and Joe Rogan had. It was such a good conversation. Um, but this totally erased all of it. And I don't. Again, people need to understand that the devil is always in the details. What what the mainstream media now is really good at doing is giving you an outline sketch of everything, that of every news article, right? They give you a stick figure drawing. But is that how we view the world? Is that how we view the world? No, we don't view the world in stick figure sketches. There's no way that that's a viable way to look at the world. What do? Instead, we approach that stick figure and we start shading. What is that called? Or we start adding the black and whites. That's called shading, right? That gives us contour. It gives us faces. It shows us the peaks and valleys of our thing. That's exactly what a Joe Rogan podcast does when he brings on these people. He takes the time to shade all these conversations into a beautiful piece of artwork. Now, again, do I agree with everything that Joe says? Is he the end all be all of truth? No. But I would much rather hear these discussions, especially with someone like Joe Rogan or Brett Weinstein or Heather Heying or Eric Weinstein, because they actually talk about the nuanced issues, the shading of our lives. And all of those people are Democrats. It's worrisome, to say the least. And I was going to, I'm going to catch up on the chat real quick here before we move to that next little segment. Jordan Peterson said something interesting during a discussion he had with Patrick Bet David. I believe it was where he talks about the mainstream media trying to keep themselves relevant. Yeah, no, there's no doubt about it. I don't doubt it for a second. And that's the thing, is like what we're seeing now when news stories are perpetuated or shared or moved along, it's because there's clicks in it, right? And that's where most of these websites are staying relevant, because there are clicks in outrage. And blogs discovered that about 10 years ago. Replace reporters with vloggers and talk show hosts. Yeah, exactly. Well, because people realized how important that stuff is, or not how important, how lucrative that thing is. Blogging became really, really popular once people realized they can monetize outrage the way they could. And once they did that, blogging was the next best thing. Once YouTube took off and became as big as it is, people took that model of blogging and no one wanted to read anymore. Well, I can just listen to some asshole talk about it all day. And as long as it makes me mad, we'll keep it going. And in many ways, I mean, maybe that's me feeding off the algorithm now. Didn't some courts basically rule a lot of the companies aren't news for their own? I don't know, but that honestly, I always used to hear that Fox isn't registered as a news thing. It's they're considered entertainment, but Shag needs to learn how to highlight. Maybe so. Maybe so. Listen, I'm just getting used to this whole YouTube thing, all right? I'm too distracted to give a nuanced take on this. I'm still laughing at Google Docs trying to spell check my misspelling of Ouija as pizza. Should I make lentils or rice? You should make... Ooh. Lentils are better for you. Fact check me on that. Lentils are better for you. Make lentils. When I was having discussions about vaccines, natural immunity, I wouldn't bring up news outlet reports or anything. Yet that person would agree with me. Well, it's hard because what's happened nowadays is that if you discuss stuff like that, people want to know your sources. Where'd you hear that? At least in my opinion. Well, where'd you hear that from? I'll say, well, so and so said it. Oh, well, but I didn't hear that. Well, what are you reading? Um, I'm watching Don Lemon, Wolf Blitzer. Okay, but if you bring up Fox News, or like if I brought up something that I heard on Fox News, or I said, oh, I heard Tucker Carlson say something, or the Daily Caller, or the Daily, can't even think, Ben Shapiro's outlet, if I brought up any of those, oh, no way, there's no possible way. But even someone as objective as, well, I consider him pretty good at staying objective, as Tim Pool. I see someone like that, and like, I don't agree with everything that Tim says, but I like his approach on things. I know when he's going way off track and he's getting in the weeds. He has some guests that do try and keep him on track, but it's his show, right? He's gonna say the things he wants. Right, and here's the thing too, Rady, is that you'll link those articles. At least in my experience, I'd link articles. I'd show, well, how do you know that's real? How could you interpret that data? How do you interpret that data? You're not an expert. Suddenly, it becomes like arguing from like you have to argue from a position of authority, which is not good because anyone can read, anyone could, a lot of people can deduce. There's very few things I think we can't sift through. I've been asked to be a volunteer to help homeless kids and teens because of my past life. We all change, and we can be the change. Absolutely. We can absolutely be a different person than we were yesterday. I tell this to my students all the time. These kids, those kids are there to learn certain like technical skills, but that's not the only thing they're learning while they're there. And I'll ask them straight to their face. I said, "How did you grow up? Did you like how you grew up?" And most of them will say, "No, absolutely not." And I say, "Is that what you want for your future? Do you want to be growing? Do you want to continue how you grew up? Do you want to continue feeling like that?" Well, no. Well, then how are you going to change that? And they all look at me like dumbfounded, like I just showed them sliced bread for the very first time. People are getting their channels flagged for misinformation by reading things said literally by places like CNN and the White House. So the truth is subjective. Absolutely. And I don't necessarily think that a lot of this is being vetted by like actual people. When things are flagged, or when strikes are going, well, maybe not strikes, but when things are flagged or demonetized, I think it's because some machine is listening and they're looking for words, particular words. And when it's not fully, when it's not completely what they expect it to be, then that's the issue. But when they appeal those strikes, or they appeal those things, they usually get overturned. But they wouldn't stick with arguing my points. They would argue with me as if they're arguing with what people on Fox News, right? And that's I think that's part of the tactic, is that they start asking questions about your questions, and that everything becomes derailed, and it's really hard to get back to where your original claim. Oh, of course they're anti-Fox News. But honestly, Fox News is in the same, and a lot of times is in the same position as something like as CNN. They're doing the bidding of their higher up. Right? All those guys are, they're losing out because they read off of something else, and it's like, well, and yeah, all mainstream media is BS for the most part. Yeah. And that's the other thing too. The problem is you cite things like Newsmax or any of that, and people are like, oh, nope, next. Let's also take a look too at the logical ending of something like the SJW ways of thinking. Jack Posobiec tweeted this out from Slate. From Slate. I found a creepy list on my son's laptop. Creepy list on my son's laptop. What was written on there, you say? What was written on there, you say? Well, oh, I'm not going to do that because he started writing down things like that a particular student's mother was a police officer, was a cop, that the one of the students had no pronouns in their Instagram bio, that another student laughed at a fat joke, and problematic shows listed as one of their friends' favorites. Oh, and then also mimicked a foreign accent. Um, this is the logical end to these woke politics. Parents raise their kids to with zero accountability, and kids start making lists of their friends and thinking that normal behavior is somehow problematic. And the parents are pleased that their son is actually taking an interest in his peers, but they get a weird feeling about this spreadsheet. You don't say. You don't say. As much as I don't condone the behaviors mentioned, well, again, weird. It seems a bit creepy for him to be monitoring his classmates. You think? Hello? You're raising the next. You're raising the next generation of Gestapo? Yeah, that's a little weird. I would be a little worried. I also wonder what he's trying to do with the document. I'm getting some serial killer vibes, like he's gonna take some matters into his own hands. Given the long, so another concern is that we are white and some of the kids on the list are black. Given the long history of white people policing black existence, I question whether Jack is the right person to be taking on this task. It's truly remarkable. It's truly remarkable that we live in a time where this is not considered some sort of like racism. Like when people talk about whiteness, when they talk about God, I don't know. It totally, my mind is blown that this is a reality for someone. Now, this isn't necessarily indicative of the whole. Remember, like, I'm not saying that if someone is raised under the woke cult that they will be making lists of their friends, but the only thing I can do is give you a personal anecdote of my own. While I was home, I was having lunch with some friends, and they started discussing problematic movies of the past. And they, at first I thought it was kind of a joke, but then they started like mentioning movies that we all loved and grew up with, and they're like, "Oh, this is, it's pretty problematic, it hasn't aged well." And I'm like, "What do you mean?" They're like, "Oh, Tropic Thunder, it's very problematic." And I said, "It's Hollywood satire. That's the point. That's the point. It's it hurts my head, man. It hurts my head to think that you can't even enjoy entertainment anymore. Entertainment. It's problematic. So is something like this, is your child being raised under the woke cult? Is it a logical end that they'll be making lists of their friends and their behavior? I'm not saying that everyone's doing it, but I can't help but think that that's where a lot of these people come. This is where a lot of people come to. And in the fact that the parents are somehow taken by surprise that their entire cult, which divides people up by race and identity anyway, is somehow dividing up his friends based on behaviors that they taught him were bad. This is why you talk to your kids. This is why you engage with your kids as much as you can while also allowing them to make their own decisions. Now, again, it's a free country. These people can raise their kids how they want, but I'll tell you that this is not how the real world works. It's just not. I will not be raising my children like this. I will, again, teach them how to come to their own conclusions, think on their own. I will not give them the answers for the most part. I try not to. It's alarming, friends. It's I don't know what happens overall, but those are some of the big things that are going on in the news this this week. It's pretty gnarly. Teaching them to think, not necessarily what to think. Exactly. And as an educator to some degree, that is always my mission. I'm not going to tell you what to think. I'm not going to tell you who's good. I'm not going to tell you who's bad. I'm going to I'm going to teach you how to sift through this sort of thing. Again, anecdotal evidence isn't really indicative of anything other than your own personal experience, but you know, you hear it enough times. To be fair, I've heard POCs called white for decades. It's shockingly easy to get voted off the island. Yeah. Oh yeah. Well, at some point they just begin to eat their own. And I haven't watched the whole Dave Chappelle special. Um, but from what I've heard, he at the end of that special he talks about Daphne, who was a trans comedian, and they were friends, and she ended up committing suicide because of a lot of or allegedly committed suicide because of all of the pressures that she was facing from speaking out and supporting him during his Sticks and Stones, or in the aftermath of his Sticks and Stones specials a few years ago. They don't want you to think for themselves. You need to think along with the hive mind, and if you cannot do that, then you have no place in society. You need to be cast out. From what I've gathered, that if you're right of Bernie Sanders, you're an alt-right extremist, and if you don't agree with everything that AOC and the crew has to say, you're not considered a Democrat. You need to agree with everything that AOC says in order to identify as a Democrat. There's no other place for you. But that's where this channel was born out of. If you're in someone like myself who is literally politically confused, then this is the place for you. This is the place that you gather, you come, we discuss what we can and understand what we can. I did my first workouts in a long time yesterday, and I am sore. Chest right here. I was doing a bunch of push-ups, planks, and my son started doing some along with me. It was pretty awesome. Still remember going to my cousin's house growing up and took my Barbie dolls with me. They took my white Barbie dolls and had me play with their black ones. What? How dare they? How dare they? I'll do one more for the lulz. One more for the lulz. Billy Porter is upset. Billy Porter is upset because Vogue Vogue decided to use Harry Styles to represent emerging conversations about non-binary style instead of him. This is all you need to know about 2021, friends. Two men upset, or one man upset that another man got the role as the first man on the cover of Vogue. Now, I can definitely understand his I can understand why he's so upset, considering he's been doing it a lot longer than Harry Styles. But if this isn't indicative of the larger problem at work, I don't know what is. it's truly it's truly a wonder that we haven't been hit by a comet at this point. It's just so incredible. Incredible. We go, hey, I don't care how people dress. I don't care how people dress and what they want to do. What someone else does, how they dress, how they identify does not affect me unless you're requiring me to change my language. It doesn't bother me. I don't care how people do. But I just think it's weird that we're demonizing what it means to be a masculine strong man in in exchange for this. Like, again, who cares? It doesn't matter. But this is what we're fighting over at this point. This is what the news is fighting over. This is what people are fighting over. Hey, why haven't why not me? Why can't I be in a dress on the cover of whatever? Playboy putting a man in a bunny suit in their magazine. Like, I don't know if they realize, but they actually have a magazine for that particular thing, right? So um it's disturbing. It's disturbing that everything has to be for everyone, and it's just not true. I didn't necessarily want to get into this particular discussion, but I understand that there's a non-binary population, the people that don't seem to fit easily into one or the other. That does not mean that we have to destroy what is already there. There are beautiful, wonderful things that women do that men just cannot do and will never be able to do. And the fact that we are are trying to change that is bonkers, in my opinion. I watched my beautiful wife give birth to two amazing little human beings, one of which was born 4 months early, and science did its thing, and they made sure that he was safe and good and happy and healthy. Same thing with my wife, and we are systematically trying to take that away from amazing, strong women. Women, I would say, by and large, in a different way, are stronger than men. Physically speaking, I could probably outpower a lot of women in the world. That doesn't mean that overall I could best them. There are things that women can do that men simply cannot do. And the fact that we're changing that language to fit people who want to be something else is just wrong. It's just fucking, and I shouldn't say that, it's just freaking wrong that we cannot just celebrate how distinct and wonderful women are. And same thing with men. Men are distinct and wonderful and amazing creatures as well. Women literally give life. And people can't even say that. People want to pretend, and there's video of trans couples, a trans woman trying to breastfeed while the trans man sits there idly by. It's called child abuse. It's called child abuse. So we're still sitting there defending it. And if I and I will be called, and I would be called a bigot and a transphobe for saying that. And I'm sorry. I'm sorry, but there's clear, distinct differences in the sexes. And to ignore that is intellectually dishonest and wrong. Sorry. Sorry about it. Let's down the street fair. Hey, you know what I'm thinking of doing? Because every now and then we do talk about nerd stuff. I think I'm gonna get Super Smash Brothers. Does anyone play Super Smash? And I think most people in my community would agree that with your sentiment radio is that um we'll be called whatever phobes if it meant speaking the truth. And you're right. You're a woman. You're not a birthing person or a chest feeder. What in the hell? Where do they make that crap up? Super Smash Brother. Did I say Smash? This will be hopefully a regular focus on the channel. Again, here today, gone tomorrow, episode 3. We're kind of coming to a close here. We'll talk about topical things that I believe will be in and out of the news cycle, and hopefully we can sort of put out there. I know a lot of people are doing God's work with getting these topics out and talking about them because it's difficult. And again, they're being labeled as many bad things, and I'm sure at some point I'll be labeled with bad things. But the fact is that we can't just let people have their way. That these progressive extremists, like, let them have their way and change the world to fit their own narrative, because it's just wrong. There's things that just need to call them how they are. I think, and it's sort of as a final thought, I think there's a lot of people in the world, especially on the platform of Twitch, for which I am mostly on, that suffer from some sort of mental illness. And I'm not saying that I'm not one of those people, but there's a lot of people ignoring what problems are actually probably happening with them, and not getting the real help they need, hiding behind these labels, these infinite amount of labels that, quite frankly, I think are doing more harm than good. Again, these people can live lives how they want. I would suggest that they find a mental health specialist that can talk through issues with them and identify what is going on, behind the scenes. One of the best things that I listened to recently, and I have to go back and find out exactly who it was, but on Timcast IRL, they had this wonderful woman who does anti-racism training, but not in the way that CRT does it, but rather they look at, like, the episodic racism that the person experienced as in a previous time in their life, and they go after that. They talk about that. In much the same way that Daryl Dixon, when he infiltrated the KKK and converted people back, and he's looking at the minutia of it. He's looking at the little pieces of what went wrong in their past, and letting him know, like, hey, like, I am not this. Whatever you think of me, it's wrong. And he digs in. And same thing with her. She looks at the episodic racism that may have happened, or events that happened in their life that started this whole thought process. And I thought that was amazing. If more people are able to do that and look back at different episodes in their life and realize this was a very big moment in my life. What happened here? Right. Taking ownership of something that of your own issues, and fixing them. And the Twitch platform, I think, on many ways, in Twitter, they just feed into this, like, you're a victim, you need to self-destruct, you can't be a part of this, you're nobody, and you need me to get you where you need to be. Wrong. The only person that's going to change your outcomes are you. You're responsible for your behavior, not anyone else. Not anyone else. Because the majority of us don't have a gun to our head. If that were the case, you might be able to have a leg to stand on, but that's not the case. I do want to thank you all for coming out for episode 3 of Here Today, Gone Tomorrow. That's going to do it for topics today and discussions today. I have to continue on the day and get things moving. I got lots to do. We got a stream to plan for this coming week. If you guys don't follow me on socials, twitter.com/the Shagsworth, twitch.tv/the Shagsworth. Those are 2 platforms that I am on constantly giving my hot takes and I would love it if you followed me there. If you aren't subscribed to the channel yet, make sure you subscribe to the channel. Make sure you like the video, get that algorithm moving. We had a great little audience today. I thank you guys, all of you guys, for hanging out and making today one of the better live segments that we've done. And over the next couple of days, I'll be hopefully chopping this up and making little clips into it best I can. Have a wonderful evening, everyone. Be good to one another, love one another, take some personal mother effing responsibility, and better yourselves tomorrow.